Now, Defence Secretary Grant Shapps has said that the Army's time and resources are simply being wasted to promote a political agenda as he holds crisis talks with military chiefs after reports suggest they want to relax security checks to increase diversity. You couldn't make it up. He said that a woke and extremist culture has infiltrated our armed forces and that the British Army needs to focus on being a lethal fighting force. Common sense stuff. Well, to discuss this, I can now speak with the former NATO Commander, Rear Admiral Chris Parry. Welcome to the show, Chris. Always a pleasure. Here we go again. We have the Defence Secretary stating the bloomin' obvious, saying a woke extremist culture has infiltrated the Army. Time is being squandered to promote a political agenda. It needs a proper shake-up, he says. Well, he's the Defence Secretary. Surely that's his job.
Yeah, but actually he's the first one to say it, Martin. And I really hope this leads to a complete change of culture. We've had a whole generation of senior officers that have implemented, I'm afraid, these very dodgy practices, and actually with no intellectual justification or psychological justification for them being put in place. They've just gone along with the political correctness argument. And I'm afraid our armed forces have been weakened as a result.
A lot of people will agree. The astonishing fact here, Chris, the Ministry of Defence, which people are now calling the Minister for Diversity, has 93 diversity networks, including 10 for gender issues, and yet we don't have a single functioning aircraft carrier. We've completely lost the plot.
Martin, Prince of Wales sailed today. She was at 20 days' notice. They got her ready after 8 days, which is actually pretty good. I think the Navy's had a pretty bad run in the media about, obviously, Queen Elizabeth falling over. But Prince of Wales has stepped into the breach. But the fact of life is, I can tell you as a military commander and as an academic, the benefits of diversity are very marginal indeed. It's got nothing to do with skin color. It's got nothing to do with sexuality. It's all about neurodiversity, differences of opinion, perspective, and outlook. And I'm afraid to say that the critical race theory and all these other, I'm afraid, corrosive doctrines that have found their way into our society and into our armed forces can only be to the benefit of our enemies.
OK, Chris, so we've identified the problem that's crept under the barbed wire, as it were, and infiltrated the armed forces. What's the solution? How do we kick it out?
Well, it's very simple. You reward excellence instead of equity. At the moment, we've got a situation where all sorts of things, promotions, honours and awards are done on the basis of your contribution to diversity. And I'm afraid to say that what it does is establish boundaries within the armed forces between various identity groups. As far as I'm concerned, there's only one identity you need, and that is proud member of the British Armed Forces, whether it's Navy, Army or Royal Air Force. We've gone completely away from the ethos, that I joined up with, and secondly, what I've seen being successful in wartime.
Yeah, and Chris, and yet the net result of all of this, we have the smallest army since Napoleonic times, the smallest RAF since it was formed in World War I. And as I said, so few sailors. We're decommissioning ships, and yet we still seem obsessed with diversity when it comes to recruitment, LGBTQ+, pronouns, all of this. And yet the white working classes, Chris, who for generations have fought and died in our world wars, seem to be despised.
Martin, I don't care who signs up to represent our country at international level, to tell you the truth, as long as they do it from a vocational point of view, not from a transactional point of view. This isn't about, nobody joins the armed forces to get rich, or they don't join for an easy life. It's a tough life. But what you have to do is have some respect, you have to have some status, and you have to feel different. The two common myths that I'm afraid that have destroyed recruiting are it's just another job. It isn't. And people have to be compensated for the fact that it isn't just another job. And there's this idiotic idea somehow that the armed forces have got to represent society. No, they don't. They have to represent the best in society. And who determines who we put in the front line? The enemy does. So we need the people who are best suited to go into the front line and represent this country at an international level.
I've got to say, common sense mainlining from you there, former NATO Commander, Rear Admiral Chris Parry. Always an absolute joy to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.